Average speed can be really important to us cyclists. It's quite a good measure of our ability, and because of that, it's also therefore a really good way of measuring your improvement as you get fitter and therefore you get faster.
There are also plenty of benefits to improving your average speed, not least that you can become a bit more adventurous because you can travel further in the same amount of time. So if you have reached a bit of a plateau in terms of the speed that you can average, we've got some tips coming up for you now.
Yep, some of which focus on improving your ability on the bike and therefore how you get faster. And then some of them, well, they might also be called cheats because you don't have to get any fitter, but you will still go faster.
Happy days. First up, we have body position. Now, if you want to improve your aerodynamics, you could buy a swanky new frame set or some deep disc wheels, but by far the biggest difference is your position on the bike. So the difference between being upright on the tops like this and down on the drops, elbows bent with quite a flat back, is absolutely huge. And actually as well, the faster you are going, the more important it is to be aero and the more benefit you will get.
Next up, we have another one that doesn't necessarily require you to be any fitter, your pacing. If we imagine our theoretical ride is an hour long, we have a finite ability over that hour, but how we actually distribute our effort can have a huge bearing on our ultimate average speed. So if you set off too fast, you will inevitably be going slower by the end. And that kind of pacing strategy will be slower than if you measure an even tempo for the whole ride. But it's particularly important when you're doing things like climbs. And actually, one of the most striking things that I noticed when I did my first ever pro road race was comparatively how slowly the peloton rode up the climbs, but how quickly we rode on the flats and the descents. Now you can take that strategy for your own rides as well. So actually think about actively backing off when you're going up hills and instead putting that effort in when you're on the flat and maybe even when it's safe to do so on descents as well.
This next one will, I'm afraid, require a little bit of effort on your part. If you get fitter and more powerful, you will go faster on your bicycle. That is a fact. However, to get fitter, you will have to go training. However, we will recommend to you that you do quite a lot of training at sweet spot. That's about 90% of your functional threshold power, or a little bit under the maximum power you would put out for an hour. Now, the reason this is so effective, and we say it's the best bang for your buck, is because whilst it's very potent, it's not so intense that you can't do back-to-back days training at sweet spot. So you can get a large volume of it done each and every week. If you do that, you should see some very positive training adaptations. You'll have more power and therefore more speed.
Eating whilst riding is of paramount importance when you're on your bike for more than 90 minutes. And yet, despite that, experienced riders and beginners forget about this, well, quite consistently. You see, when you're riding, you're obviously using fuel. And the harder you ride, the more fuel you will burn. And so, if you're really serious about improving your average speed, you need to make sure that your muscles have enough energy to actually keep going. And so at its simplest, that'll be taking an energy drink with you to give you about 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour, or an energy gel as well. It really can make quite a sizable difference, particularly about maintaining your speed as you get into the closing, dying minutes of your ride.
The less weight you are carrying around with you, the faster you will go on any ride that involves some uphill gradients. Just a few kilograms can make an enormous difference, as Matt and I found out on an experiment we did in Andorra a couple of years ago. And we will link to that at the end of this video. Most people have got some weight that they can lose, so you can either exercise a bit more or cut down your calories slightly, or do a mix of the two. The other option is to lose some weight from your bike. And that, as you know, darned expensive.
Yes, weight is important, but as Dan's already touched on, so too is aerodynamics. And actually on rides where there's less elevation change, aerodynamics is even more important than weight. Now, once you've got your body position sorted, and let's face it, that is quite quick, easy, and certainly cheap to do, there are other avenues you can go down, even though it will require a little bit more investment. So your clothing, for a start, make sure you have really tight fitting cycling kit. Then of course, there's your helmet. You can invest in aerodynamic helmets. And then when it comes to your bike, there's almost no limit. So aerodynamic wheels for a start, aerodynamic frames, certainly. And then of course, there's the addition of aerodynamic time trial bars as well. That of course helps with your body position too.
I don't think, Silas, it's escaped our viewers' attention that we started this video by the sea and therefore at sea level, and we're now, well, we're quite high up, aren't we? We're probably at 800 metres here.
Yeah, it's quite a long climb this, isn't it? And so this ride is definitely not conducive to a high average speed. But therein lies a bit of a lesson, because if you are really, really keen on setting record average speeds, then you need to pay careful attention to the route that you do choose.
Yeah, not just the terrain, but also the weather conditions. So if it's particularly windy out, you might want to choose to go out into the headwind or more sheltered roads, and then use the nice luxury of big open roads where the wind is right behind you.
Yeah, and one last little cheat, which actually I use regularly, is that my average speeds now are pretty much the same as when I was training when I was a full-time bike rider. But the secret is that my rides are probably a quarter or maybe even half as long as they used to be. But shorter rides, it's definitely easier to go faster.
Yeah, so less climbing, shorter rides. There's quite a lot of cheats there, isn't there? I could probably do quite a good average speed for 1 kilometre.
But therein lies also another lesson, and that's that average speeds are not necessarily the be-all and end-all to fun bike rides. Just something to bear in mind.
In all seriousness, we hope that these tips have helped you improve, or at least will do if you implement them. If you've enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up down below. And as I mentioned previously, just down here is the video that Matt and I did in Andorra to see how much difference weight makes up climbs.